Thank you so much. I am deeply honored and thrilled to address you this special evening. But in fact, it's so much more than a privilege to share a few words with you. It's also a legal duty, arising out of a contract I signed 3 years ago with our terrific leader, Steve Van Leer. Now, I'll never forget when Steve pulled me aside at the start of my selection day dinner and read through my fellow elect agreement clause by clause. Of course, this was just before I'd started law school, so I had no idea how to interpret a contract. So naturally, I just nodded and signed on the dotted line. But I've been reflecting on that evening as this event has approached, and really the only word that comes to mind is surreal. Less than 24 hours before that night, I'd walked out of my interview feeling like a popped balloon. Walking home in the drizzling rain, the armor of my freshly pressed suit thoroughly pierced, I called home and told my parents I had totally blown it. Somehow, though, thanks to the generosity and goodwill of the selection committee, I got that auspicious call a few hours later, a call that changed the course of my law school journey and so much else. Now, as Steve had mentioned that evening, way back in the fall of 2019, that the next 3 years would see a global pandemic that would transform how we learn and work, a violent insurrection on our nation's capital, an overdue reckoning over race and policing, and a wholesale reversal of decades of constitutional law, I probably would have said, wait, you're telling me the Mets clinched the playoffs? But in all seriousness, I'm sure my response would have been quite different, probably a prolonged silence followed by a sprint to the exit. And that's because, truthfully, the last 3 years have been marked by some of the most intense moments of uncertainty and unease I can remember. But the reason I look back on my time at the University of Chicago Law School with an overwhelming sense of pride, joy, and community is in large part thanks to the people I met through this fellowship and the unmatched support I received from them each step of the way. So thank you, Steve, and thank you to the board of directors for enriching my life in ways I can never fully repay. And I'd next like to recognize the past and present fellow elects that I came to know during law school. I loved our gatherings and benefited enormously from your advice, even when I ostensibly became the elder statesman of our group. I'm so grateful that I got to know you better through this fellowship. I'd also like to express my deep gratitude to Doug and to Linda for being amazing stewards of the Chicago Patiño community and for their mentorship and friendship during periods when I needed it most, particularly during the height of the pandemic in the spring of 2020. Although I was isolated by myself in Hyde Park, I never felt alone. Thank you, Doug and Linda. And saving the best for last, I need to thank Janice. Janice is the first member of the Patiño community I met, and I'll never forget it. Janice sat with me as I waited for my interview, and she could tell that I was a nervous wreck, but she gave me a reassuring look and told me that everything would be just fine. And because she's Janice, I obviously believed her. So thank you for being there for me in that moment, Janice, and for everything else you do to keep this show running. For those who may not know, I recently moved back to my hometown, New York City, where I started working as an associate in the litigation department at Paul Weiss. I feel very fortunate to begin my legal career at a firm that is well known for training newly minted attorneys and for its decades-long commitment to public service through its pro bono work. I was extremely gratified to learn during orientation that one of my first meetings would be with a partner who leads the pro bono practice group, and I'm pleased to share that I've already started working on behalf of victims through cases that are important to me. So while this event marks the formal end of my time as a fellow elect, it also represents the renewal of my commitment to this fellowship, its mission, and its people. After 3 years of law school characterized by periods of social upheaval, I am even more inspired by Tony and Francesca's legacy, and I hope to honor it however I can by working in the service of others, not just when it's convenient, but especially when times are hard. Thank you again for this great honor.